Dr. Scott, good to have you and a warm good morning to you. I want to start with these submissions which you are calling on the public to make to Parliament. What exactly is your call here to the public?
Well, our call is to improve the bill extensively because the bill focuses more on the criminalisation of people who break the laws which are laid down in this bill. And the laws are quite draconian for people who stray outside the limitations of what the bill is going to allow. And our main argument is that the Concord ruling basically allows people to, as you pointed out in your introduction, allows people to use and cultivate and in fact purchase. I'll just read you this clause. The following provisions are declarant, inconsistent with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and invalid. This is the Constitutional Court ruling invalidating the existing regulations. Only to the extent that they prohibit the use of cannabis by an adult in private dwellings where the possession, purchase, or cultivation of cannabis is for personal consumption by an adult. So in fact, it does say you're allowed to buy cannabis in your private dwellings. But in fact, in terms of being able to grow cannabis, the millions of South Africa live in shacks and in crowded communities where there's no privacy and there's no security to either grow or store cannabis. And so the bill as it stands excludes those millions of South Africans. The affluent communities or even the middle class, whatever, are fine because even you can grow something in a pot plant on your balcony if you haven't got space, a garden. And so it's actually a de facto prohibition of using cannabis on the poorer community. So it's completely and utterly discriminatory. Yeah. And we need to sort that out. And it also obviously excludes people in the rural areas who've been growing cannabis for years. And it makes them vulnerable to police and gang and organized crime persecution.
So just for clarity here, you find it quite discriminatory that the affluent community seems to have more of an advantage in this particular bill as compared to those millions, as you've just attributed, that are obviously living in previously disadvantaged, communities, these including shack dwellings, informal settlements. So there seems to be no balance whatsoever here in this constitution, hence the call then for the greater public to have a say in terms of these submissions to Parliament.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, a recent example of how the poorer communities are always fall foul of these regulations which are made by sort of middle class and upward people is the recent lockdown regulations on alcohol and tobacco, where people who had the means and the storage space were able to store tobacco products and alcohol for as long as they wanted, limitless quantities, whereas the poorest people were the subject of the police brutality and the army brutality that we saw on our TV screens. And the problem is also that the affluent communities, they look at that and they see poor people breaking the law and they say, yes, the police are right to actually do that to people because they're affecting the rest of the community. And they don't understand that those people couldn't stock up, so they went down to buy a beer and then got beaten up.
But also,
and the same thing.
Yeah, you were saying?
Sorry. The same thing happens with the drug laws. The poorer communities are subject to gang violence, which is drug-related. The more affluent communities, which are which consist of a lot of comprise the biggest market for drugs. I'm talking about other drugs as well. They don't really get targeted by the police because they're not easy targets.
Now, these are valid points that you're raising here, Dr. Scott. And, just going back to Parliament's response here, we did hear from the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, obviously inviting the public to also make these submissions, and they even further saying that they will be guided by these public comments. Do you know at this point how much time frame the public has to ensure that their voices are heard in this regard?
As far as I know, the latest deadline is the 9th of October. You never know, they might extend it. But obviously, it's best if people get in fairly soon with their comments.
All right, then. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Keith Scott joining us here talking about the Cannabis for Private Use Bill, which we understand Parliament is calling on all public members in South Africa to make their submissions to be considered. And indeed, it says here that members of the public have until the 9th of October to give their views on this particular bill.